But first, in the first big policy backflip of the campaign, the coalition today dumped its policy to end work from home rights for federal public servants if elected in 4 weeks' time. And it said it would no longer be sacking anyone to get the public sector headcount down by 41,000 over the next 5 years, as it's previously committed. Instead, it will just be attrition to get the numbers down. So that means when someone leaves, they're not replaced unless they're in a frontline job like the federal police. And the reason why the coalition still wants that headcount down is because they say Labor's increase of 41,000 bureaucrats in just 3 years is not a good use of taxpayers' money. And it's hard not to agree, given we hardly got any extra value for all the people and the billions it's cost us. But let's be clear why the coalition has dumped this policy. Not because it isn't sound, but because they didn't sell it well enough. They put it out there too early in the campaign with nothing much else to talk about, and they let a Labor scare campaign take hold. Now let me explain. In principle, it's absolutely reasonable for a coalition government to want to make government as productive as it can be and to reduce any unnecessary costs for taxpayers, because the right side of politics believes government should be only as big as it needs to be to do the things that we can't do for ourselves, but otherwise for government to be as small as possible. Now, Labor, on the other hand, they love big government because big government equals weak citizens, and the more people that the state employs, the more people are in unions and outside the public sector workforce. Before COVID, work from home flexibility was there for public servants, but only on an as-needs basis. It was never 5 days a week. It was never a right, and nor should it be. But in comes Labor, and to buy votes, it's allowed every public servant in the country to demand the right to work from home all 5 days a week. Now, how on earth does someone in border protection, let's say, do their job from a laptop in their kitchen? But this is just one of the departments, Home Affairs, where some 70% of public servants now work from home. Federally, Labor slammed Dutton for this policy, even though Labor's Chris Minns wants more of his New South Wales public servants back in the office. So as sensible as this policy is, both in terms of the operation of good government and productivity for taxpayers, the coalition dropped it out too early in the campaign. And they failed to kill off Labor's scare campaign. Instead, they let the story run that if elected, Dutton would somehow force everyone, private and public sector alike, back into the office, and that somehow he was anti-women and anti-family. Here's Peta Credlin today.
I think we've made a mistake in relation to this policy, and I think it's important that we say that and recognise it. And our intention always was to make sure that where taxpayers are working hard and their money is being spent to pay wages, that it's being spent efficiently. Our plan, which was only ever targeted for the public service in Canberra, Labor's been able to create into a scare campaign.
Look, after an ordinary week last week and the stalling momentum of the last month, the coalition did the only thing it could today with that policy that they hadn't positioned well enough, and a policy that was being distorted and demonised by its opponents. That's why it's being dumped. And that's what Labor has always been good at, taking something that's perfectly reasonable and sensible and turning it into a scare campaign. Because while Labor's terrible at government, they are ruthless politically. It's this political rat cunning that's behind the movement in the polls today. Today's news polls have got the government now ahead on the two-party preferred basis, 52-48. And while it's fair to say the coalition strategists are concerned, some coalition supporters are even despondent, this is still anyone's race. As I reminded people last week, in 2010, Tony Abbott, well, he was behind in every single poll of that year and the campaign, but ended up with more seats than Labor. In 2019, Scott Morrison too, behind throughout the campaign, but he ended up with his miracle win because quiet Australians didn't necessarily tell pollsters what they were thinking. And this time around, well, the fundamentals is similarly against the government. There is a cost of living crisis in Australia, and Anthony Albanese and his government is to blame because they have made it much, much worse. The issue remains, though, that while people are feeling the pain, they've not yet connected that with Albanese in his government. And that's the big job ahead for the coalition. Now, out there in the real world, places where people are watching reality TV tonight, they're not getting a political update on Sky News, amongst people who don't read newspapers, who get their news via social media, I tell you what, the election hasn't even registered. The election, they say? What election? So the coalition has time to reboot its messages, but they don't have forever. Because in 2 weeks' time now, pre-polls will open and people will start to vote. And between now and then, Labor's push to buy your vote will only ramp up further. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister, well, he can't help telling lies to confuse voters. And it's not just the power bills lie, which he might have half believed before he then disowned the modelling on which it's based. And it's not just the Chinese live-fire exercises, they're no big deal, that lie, which he might have felt was necessary to avoid further antagonising his mates in Beijing. And it's not just a lie that the government was thinking about buying back the Port of Darwin, peddled that one out on NT Radio on Friday in a pathetic attempt to try and gazump the coalition. It's all the little lies he tells that say a hell of a lot about his character.
I stepped back one step. I didn't fall off the stage. Just one leg went down, but I was sweet.
Give me a break. I mean, if he can tell blatant lies over that, as opposed to just admitting he had a tumble and moving on, well, how can we trust this bloke on the things that we don't see with our own eyes? If he lies on the little stuff, God help us on the big stuff.